What's up everyone? Today we're going to be talking about things that I found concerning and perhaps a bit disappointing about the Starfield gameplay that was shown at the showcase. I want to be very clear that I am excited for Starfield, and these concerns do not outweigh that excitement. I did a video about highlights from the showcase just after the event. You can find that at the top right corner there. For the most part, I was very pleased with what was shown at the showcase, but there were 5 things that I found particularly concerning, so we're going to talk about those things here. Firstly, there appear to be no playable alien races. In fact, every city seems to only consist of humans. This is especially surprising because more than half of the races in Elder Scrolls are non-human. It feels very strange for Bethesda to have mostly non-humanoid races in Elder Scrolls, but not to have any at all in their new space game. I, for one, was really hoping to play as an alien, folks, and this is kind of a letdown for me. It could be that they're saving aliens for DLC. Could be that the first DLC will be called First Contact, and the whole premise is meeting aliens and learning to get along, or maybe going to war based on the player's choice, or maybe faction affiliation. We will see. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. We're not talking 10 planets, or 100 planets. We're talking 1,000 planets. Todd Howard talked about this in detail in a recent IGN interview, so I'll reference that a few times as I'm going through this. When asked about this, he started by expressing confidence in Bethesda's procedural generation systems. He essentially said that he's confident that these systems have made good enough planets that by adding whatever amount of handcrafting that they have made them rich enough to be fun to explore. The problem with that is there's a lot more that goes into exploring the world within a Bethesda game than just the landscape itself. Think about when you're just wandering through Skyrim. Sure, sometimes you are going to take in a nice view, but a lot of the time you're going to be looking at creatures and looking at ruins per se, things like that. So does Starfield have 1,000 different creatures, 1,000 different plants, and 1,000 different biomes? I sincerely doubt that. So what exactly is there to find on each planet? What's the point of going big if you only have, let's say, 5 Skyrim's worth of things to show? How many of these 1,000 planets are going to have a Skyrim's worth of variety, and how many are going to be like walking through Whiterun forever? Truthfully, folks, I think that the biomes of Skyrim are appropriately sized. If they were too much bigger, they'd get boring. Furthermore, one common criticism of Oblivion is that it lacks biodiversity. Most of Cyrodiil is generic forest, and that scale certainly isn't planet-sized. This has been the crutch of many interplanetary games. When scale, or perhaps a more appropriate word in this instance, scope, when scope increases, the need for variety increases exponentially. For example, this was Destiny's crutch. Sure, the idea of exploring planets sounded fun, but in reality all you really do is ride for miles, seeing the same few assets and experiencing very similar content over and over everywhere you go. I want to be clear that I'm not concerned that Starfield will be lacking in content. After all, Todd Howard said that they're now at 200,000 lines of dialogue, and we know that there are factions, quest lines, and all the usual things. So it doesn't sound like anything was sacrificed for the sake of the scale or scope. My concern is how much of this game are most players actually going to play? How much of this work is in vain? This is similar to what Todd Howard said about not being able to fly your ship straight down to the surface. How many of these 1,000 planets are most players actually going to value? Why spread, let's say, 500 creatures, 200 biomes, and 300 dungeons over 1,000 planets when you could pack that into 100 very rich planets? We'll only know how good these 1,000 planets are when we see them, but right now it is a bit concerning. I'd hate for most of them to exist in vain. We also have to take things like DLC and modders into account. That's really what I think the point of this 1,000 planets is, to leave room for expansion. Bethesda may be thinking that they could keep adding content to this game for the next decade, like what 343 Industries is doing with Halo Infinite. They could also be thinking that they don't want the gaps between Elder Scrolls 6 and 7 and Fallouts 5 and 6 to be as long as the current gaps between Elder Scrolls 5 and 6 and Fallout 4 and 5. So they may want to do Elder Scrolls 7 and Fallout 6 before they do Starfield 2, which I could totally see if Starfield is a big hit like Skyrim Skyrim was. They may just try to ride it for 10 to 20 years like they have with Skyrim. The third spot is the combat, both in space and on the planet's surface. I'm going to use Fallout 4 as a reference here. There's a lot of fans that kind of prefer Fallout 3, and I kind of feel some of that, but one of the things that's regularly praised about Fallout 4 is the combat. Those mechanics and those physics are terrific. It feels great to move your character around, shooting, using VATS and all that, and it really suits that game perfectly. Looking at Starfield's combat, it looked pretty stiff, almost like what you would expect in a Call of Duty multiplayer kind of experience. So I question how well that will suit a Bethesda single-player RPG. But you know, it could be great. I really liked the slide and jetpack features. I also have a question. What happens if your suit is breached? I mean, you're in space, you must need to fix that. So my guess is there's going to be an item like a stim pack that you use to patch up your suit if you need it. What if one of the sneak attacks is when you sneak up to an enemy, you can poke a hole in their suit or jam something into their jetpack? That would be awesome. Like if there was an animation where they go flying everywhere and maybe hit other enemies, that would be so awesome. Another thing that I definitely think they're going to play with is different planets having different physics, and that can be a lot of fun. I mean, a lot of really good Halo custom games play with things like that, you know, like gravity, like player speed, things like that. To reiterate, my concern is that this will be a step down from Fallout 4's combat, which really is a minimal concern. I mean, maybe Fallout 4's combat is something that fans will always look back on with nostalgia for, and nothing will really ever replace it, which is fine. What's a bit more concerning is the space combat, so let's get into that now. There have been rumors about the space combat not being exciting for a while, and many fans, including myself, weren't enthralled by what we saw. More than anything, it reminded me of a campaign level from Halo Reach, Long Night of Solace, which I enjoy playing for 15 to 20 minutes of a campaign level, but do I really want to do that on and off throughout a whole playthrough of a Bethesda game? I'm concerned that it will get boring eventually, and that it will start to feel more like a chore than playing a game, which makes me think that it may be one of the first things to get overhauled by modders when that becomes a thing. Someone may just make a mod for fast traveling between planets. That being said, I do have some ideas that might spice space combat up. Believe it or not, this first idea actually comes from an episode of the Magic School Bus. Remember when they fly into Jupiter's red spot? Well, what if in Starfield you could fly into gas giants like that and maybe have spaceship battles inside of them? This would give space combat a nice change of pace from always fighting in open space. This way you're at least looking at a different background, and maybe on the inside, like for say Jupiter, there's all these storms. Maybe there's things that can affect you on the inside of gas giants. That would be a really cool thing to play with. A similar idea is there could be something with asteroids and asteroid fields. There could be asteroid combat somewhat like the scene in The Empire Strikes Back where the Millennium Falcon is being chased by Boba Fett. I am optimistic that Bethesda has implemented things like those two ideas, because those tend to be the kinds of things that they don't show in the first gameplay footage, so maybe they are just saving that for later. Next up is visual quality and performance issues. There were constant frame rate drops throughout the footage. This other YouTuber, Destin, explains the technical elements a lot better than I really can. You can find his video at the top right corner there. So I watched the whole showcase in standard YouTube resolution, which looked fine for every game except Starfield. Throughout that whole 15 minutes, I kept noticing things looking blurry and these frame rate drops and things just otherwise not right. So when I went back in after the showcase to watch it again, I turned up the resolution and my computer had difficulty processing it, leading to performance issues. Now, my computer is not bad at all, folks. It's not a new computer, but it's certainly not that old. So I guess the concern here is, how will this look on a console, on an Xbox Series X, and how will it run? Let's say I'm playing at 1440p on an Xbox Series X. Am I going to have constant frame rate issues and maybe even crashes? I hope not, but I mean, if my computer had issues with 1440p on YouTube, then I'm kinda concerned. I bet these visual quality and performance issues are a big part of why the game was delayed. Bethesda knows that it has to run better or it's just going to be Fallout 76 all over again. So if it's true that that's part of the reason for the delay, then really that's a good sign, folks. It means that Bethesda knows it has to be better and they're going to make it better. So the last of these 5 concerns I have about the Starfield gameplay from the showcase is I'm not sure about these Sandbox or or sometimes even tycoonish mechanics. For the past few games, Bethesda has gradually adopted a few sandbox mechanics into their games. It really starts with Skyrim's Hearthfire DLC, then there's the settlement building in Fallout 4, then they really did kinda go too far with Fallout 76. Many fans do prefer to just skip that stuff. I know a guy who just randomly places beds and water features around Sanctuary just to get it over with. Now, I'm all for the sandbox stuff. I like building things. The thing I don't like is when it gets a bit tycoonish. By that I mean things like having to keep the settlers happy, having to make sure they have water, having to go protect them from raiders when I'm in the middle of a quest. It interferes with role-playing, with questing, with adventuring. So what exactly are Starfield, sandbox, or tycoonish mechanics going to be like? Well, I've got some pictures to go over here, folks, and I've got to say, they look tedious. Here's the research laboratory. We've got pharmacology here, food and drink, outpost development, equipment, and weaponry. That's 5 categories that you're going to have to do these research projects to unlock stuff for. Here's the outpost building program. We've got building requirements here, and some materials listed. There's an operating cost. At the bottom here, we've got cargo, crew, power, and production. Now, I'm not sure what exactly each thing here is. I'm not really sure what exactly it's measuring with cargo and crew. Is that how much? Their happiness? I don't know, but it's something there. Now here's the spaceship building program. I'm not even going to list everything here just because there's so much. I'll just read a few things from the bottom here. You've got mass, top speed, mobility, jump range, crew, cargo, shield, hull. So there's a whole lot going on here with the sandbox and tycoonish mechanics here. It seems very tedious. Now, I'm all for the sandbox stuff. I'm very excited to build a spaceship, but I mean, this is a lot, and I'm concerned that it's going to interfere with questing, with gameplay. So that concludes this video. We just discussed 5 concerns or maybe disappointments from the Starfield gameplay that was shown at the showcase. But like I said before, there is much more to be excited for, so please like, subscribe, share, every bit helps this channel grow, and hopefully next time I will be revealing the mother of each of Jarl Balgruuf's children. See you then.